Hello everyone, welcome to the Global Big Data Conference warm-up webinar. The main GitHub Copilot workshop is scheduled for August 23rd. In today's session, our speaker, Brent Laster, a global trainer, book author, and the founder and president of Tech Skills Transformations will give an introduction to GitHub Copilot. Hi Brent, please take over and introduce yourself and start the session. Thank you.
Hi, Lena. Thank you for having me and welcome everybody to our preview today. That's what I'm calling it, the preview. I'm going to go ahead and switch over and just share my slides here. I've got a little bit of a slide presentation. We're going to make sure we do a demo for you folks as well so you can get see a little bit about GitHub Copilot. You should be able to see my slides now. So again, this is just a preview to talk a little bit about what's coming up August 23rd. When the main event will be occurring, we'll have a full day of training on GitHub Copilot. And we'll be talking about what that course is going to be like and what you'll be able to experience in it and a number of other things in there. So our goals for a time together today, my goals for a time together today, and hopefully these will work for you as well, are to help you learn a little bit about GitHub Copilot. As I said, I'll do a demo in just a minute and show you around, give you a little bit of a flavor of it. We're going to tell you about the course. I want to tell you about what's involved when you are participating in one of these full-day trainings from my company, Tech Skills Transformations, what you can expect, the kinds of topics we'll cover, those kinds of things. And we'll also share some info with you about other training that's coming up that Lena has scheduled, some very interesting things on generative AI and security and all sorts of interesting topics there. So hopefully that will be of interest as well. And as well, I want to make sure I try to answer any questions that come up. Please feel free to put any questions in the webinar chat. I'll try to make sure that I address them along the way. Here's some optional questions for you to think about. If you want to reply in the chat or you want to, just give some feedback or maybe give some thought to as well. What's your experience with GitHub Copilot? It's also always useful to me as a trainer to understand more about the background people have with it and the experience. And that could also be, for that matter, what do you think of it? Good, bad, otherwise? No wrong answers here. What do you want to learn about it? I'll tell you again about what we're going to do in the larger course on the 23rd. But if you have particular things that you're interested in, always can try to take those into account and maybe adapt the course a little bit to make sure we cover those. What have you not been able to find information on? This is sort of an interesting question for me anytime that I'm trying to learn a technology is what have I not been able to figure out how to do or how to deal with there? An example of Copilot is maybe how do I deal with things when they're out of date, when the training for the model that it's based on doesn't understand that the latest version of Kubernetes is 1.30 or whatever it is now. How do I deal with deprecated things? And by the way, that's one of the things we'll cover in the course as well. And, would this course be useful to you? Hopefully, the answer will be yes, but I want to make sure that we have give you enough information up front where you can make an informed decision about that. So first off, a demo. Since you came to learn about GitHub Copilot, I want to make sure that I show you around a little bit there. We won't get into all the things, obviously, that we would do in the course. And the course is very much a hands-on course, and you will have labs to do for each one where you'll get to practice with GitHub Copilot. You'll need to sign up for a GitHub Copilot trial, but we'll talk about that more as we get closer to the course. There is a free version you can get for 30 days. But hopefully now you're able to see my screen share here and able to see this is a code space. This is a virtual environment that GitHub has provided for us that you can provide. And in the course, it's a one-click setup. That means if you're using the code space that we provide, it is one click on a button. I'm sorry, two clicks. One click to start it, one to say create a new code space. And those two clicks and you'll be up and running. You'll have everything you need. I have everything installed for you as well. And so this is an example of a code space. You can also use other IDEs that GitHub Copilot integrates with, VS Code, the JetBrains IDEs, different ones as well if you want. But I wanted to keep it as simple as possible for you. So let me just jump in here and show you a couple of things with this. What we'll do starting off with is I am going to go ahead and create a new file here. So I'm going to create a file that it ultimately is, I want it to be able to multiply two matrices together and produce the dot product. Don't worry if that's not something you're familiar with. You don't have to be. This is just an example of demonstrating the code. So what I did there is I just told it to open up a new file there. Now you notice at the top here, it says, press the command key. I'm on a Mac at I to ask GitHub Copilot to do something. So let's do this. This is basically a shortcut to the interactive chat. When you're working with GitHub Copilot, you really have two main ways you interact with the technology. One is through what we might call the accelerate function. That is, you're working, you're coding, you are creating code, and it's suggesting completions for you as you're going along. It's helping to accelerate your productivity, to help you do things faster by suggesting code in there for you. The other way is more maybe the Explorer. Sometimes they call this the Explorer mode, which is you're able to interact with the chat in a conversational way. So the chat feature, much like Chat GPT, if you've ever used that, you can have conversational discussions with it and ask it to do something. So let's ask it to actually create a function to create a function and a main to that produce a dot product for 2 3x3 matrices. And so it's going to think for a moment. No results. Okay, let's try it again here. Let's try this and see, make sure I'm connected to Copilot. Let's do this. Let's take it over here. Let's say create a function, a Python function to and main that produces a dot product for 2 3x3 matrices. So one of these things is about Copilot is, and I'll tell you the good and the bad in the course. Sometimes it does have those kinds of things that you saw where it just doesn't respond there. Sometimes you have to nudge it as well. It's still a relatively new, but you can see here now, I find that when I go to the actual chat interface, I get a better result there. So I told it to create a function, and you can see that it's actually created a dot product. This is a Python routine to do a matrix multiplication. It's got the main here. It's got some examples in there. And so I can actually take this and I can just say insert, or let's just hover over this and say insert at the cursor. And it pops it into my editor for me. Now I'm going to make sure that I save that. Notice though that I didn't actually have to do any kind of writing any code there. I just told it what I wanted. I told it exactly what I wanted, and it produced it for me. Now, again, that might not be exactly what you want all the time, but you can see it's pretty easy to do there. Now, suppose that I'm new to Python and I said, okay, how do I run this? And it tells me, see, notice the conversational tone here to run the dot product file, follow these steps. Here are the commands. In fact, I can take the commands again, and I can actually send them over into the terminal session. The path to directory won't matter, but you can see when it actually ran this. It ran the python.product.py, and it actually produced the result of the matrix multiplication there. Again, didn't really have to do anything, didn't have to know anything really about Python in this case. So this is a great example of using Copilot when you're trying to learn a new framework or a new language and you're trying to understand it. You can ask it to help you with these kinds of things as well. So let's see what else we can do with it. Let's suppose that I change one of these to, let's say, go in here. And let's say that if I can edit it, my code space is kind of acting up a little bit. All right, we'll come back to that one. For some reason, it doesn't want to let me edit in there. It's always the demo, gods are not smiling on me right now, but let's see what we can do with testing. Let's tell it to create some tests. So I just used a shortcut here, and it has a number of shortcuts. You can see different ones here. Terminal, explain, VS Code. These ones that are workspace, VS Code terminal, those are ones that help set context. The rest of these are shortcuts for things. So what I did here was I told it just to run some tests and to create some tests. And actually, I just gave it the one command and it actually told me, here's how you can do it. Here's the plan for it. And it actually gave me code. That's a nice thing about Copilot as well. If you ask it how to do something, oftentimes it will go ahead and give you code as well. So let's go ahead and insert this into a new file. And I'm going to click on that and just save it. Save as, we'll tell it to do the DP test or dot product. And again, I can always just say, okay, well, what happens if, how do I test my code? How do I run the test? And it'll say to run the test. Here, it gives me the commands again. I can pop it over there and you can see that it ran the test. Now there was a failure in there as well. It won't take time to debug that right now, but you get the idea that you can actually change that. So you can actually see problems in there. You can run the test. Pretty straightforward. So that's kind of a very quick overview, very quick example of doing that. There are all kinds of other things you can do with it. You can ask it how to do things. You can ask it what the API is. You can tell it to explain things. You can tell it to document the code. I'll show you real quick here. Let's just say I want to do slash doc or document the code in file dot product py. And it has some nice, produces some nice header files there, also produces some additional comments as well in there, a little bit of information. So you can see that you can actually then have it automatic generate for that. So that's another place where Copilot really excels, is helping with those kind of boilerplate tasks. I like to say it's the kind of things that take kind of the fun out of programming. But it's intended more, maybe a better way to say it, is it leaves you more time and more energy to do the things that are fun about programming there. I was a programmer for many years and kind of wish I'd had something like this back then. All right, so I'm going to switch back to the slides now and just talk through a couple of things about the course that we're doing on the 23rd, just to give you kind of a rundown of that. A little bit about me really quickly here. I won't spend too much time on this. I've got the training company, Tech Skills Transformations, information there if you'd like to connect with us to see about any other training opportunities. Have a long career in the corporate world as a programmer, as a manager, director, most recently a director of a DevOps organization. We did some infrastructure security, some database products, engineer engagement all over the place, lots of different things there. One of the most recent things I did last year was to actually do a rollout, do a trial of our GitHub Copilot for our R&D organization. We ran through that. So I can talk more about that in the session on the 23rd, but it's really interesting having that sort of corporate background and working with different folks in legal and IT and all that as well around Copilot, as well as the user sort of interface with it. So I've written quite a few reports on O'Reilly's, got several books out there on Amazon.com. Also, if you do happen to have an O'Reilly subscription or are interested in doing the 30-day trial, there's a Learning GitHub Copilot book. I'm writing with O'Reilly and Copilot right now. First 3 chapters are available on O'Reilly for free. If you've got an O'Reilly account, again, there's a 30-day free trial if you're interested in that. And there's some information to connect with me on social media if you're interested for that. All right, a little bit about the course. So we're going to do a couple of things in this course. We're going to actually use Copilot hands-on in a number of different frameworks and languages, Python, Java, looking at Kubernetes, SQL, Go, JavaScript. Some of these you may not think about things that you would be places you would use Copilot, but it actually works for any kind of framework or language that is represented in the model that it was trained on, in the ChatGPT or the OpenAI model, rather, that it was trained on. So anything that was basically in GitHub, it can learn about, it knows about, and it can help with creating content, as you saw in the demo there. We also have detailed informative presentations. When I do these classes, we are actually doing things like you see the animations here on the screen. I like to have a lot of animations, a lot of pictures to help you understand things. I go for the visual aspect of it, with the pictures, the animations, the auditory, where I'm explaining to you how things work, and then the hands-on, the kinesthetic part, where you can really try it out, see how it works, get a feel for it, and feel confident with it. That's my goal for these classes, is to make sure that you feel confident with the technology once we're done. Then we also have the hands-on labs, and that's a big feature of this. You can watch videos, you can hear other people talk about it, but actually being able to get your hands dirty, so to speak, to get in there and try it out, that's the go. And we will have labs for every section that we talk about, so you can practice it. Typically, they take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes probably to do. So we have time built into the course to be able to work with those. And just a little bit of a blurb here about why attend this. I know you get inundated with a lot of information, a lot of options for learning about things like Copilot. So if you'll bear with me just a second, just we'll share with you a little bit about some of the things I think are valuable from this, then we'll move on from that. Skills and understanding you need. That's the goal here in a one session setup, to have hands-on practice, learn the best practices, the advanced tips and tricks. One of the things about the courses that I teach is I believe that when you're learning a technology, you need to be able to understand what the best practices are, what the tips and tricks are, what doesn't work and how to work around it, those kinds of things. You're really going to be using it. Not everything's going to go perfect in there. So we're going to, focus on the right way to use Copilot, how to work around some of the things that may be problematic with it, how to take advantage with it in situations you may not have thought of, like regular expression generation, for example. It's live training with an experienced SME. I get 20 years of community corporate training, multiple books on it. As you saw, I've got working on the Copilot book. So we're talking about Copilot now, probably going on a year and a half or so, doing presentations at conferences and stuff. So I've already encountered a lot of the things that can be problematic for folks, and kind of know also what's coming up. I keep in sync with GitHub and folks as I'm writing the O'Reilly book. So I know what's going to be relevant on there as coming up as well, what's changing from time to time, and so on. Live Q&A, opportunity for folks to ask questions and hopefully get the answers you need in that session there, working in a live environment as we are. Up-to-date content. I always make sure before teaching any class that I've gone through a day or two before and just make sure I've caught up on everything as I can be, and making sure that it's the up-to-date content for that. One-click environment, as I said, if you choose to use our code space environment, it's actually 2 clicks. I should fix that. But it's one click on a button and click to say create a new code space. And you'll have training materials to have after the class, the slides and the labs, and understand the good and the bad. As I was talking about, I feel like when you are learning new technology, you want to know what the bad parts of it as well. Copilot is not the only game in town in terms of these AI assistants. There are many others, Codium, Tab9, lots of others out there as well. Copilot is arguably the most popular. Works very well if you're integrating with GitHub, but I will share with you in the class what doesn't work so well and how to work around things, like when the training is not up to date, when it doesn't know that something's been deprecated. How do we get around that? How do we help Copilot understand that, no, this has been deprecated and you need to do it this way, or that kind of thing? We'll talk about those kind of issues as well. So I think there's a number of advantages to these kinds of courses in there. What we'll cover just real quickly, what Copilot is, sign up plans, how it works, the good and the bad, using it in the IDEs, code completion. We'll talk about the chat interface and how you interact with that. The chat interface gives you that richer conversational interface there, and you can do a lot more with it as opposed to what you just get with the code completions in the IDE. Both have their use cases though. We'll talk about using Copilot to write tests, document, explain code. As we said, lots of different frameworks and languages. Dealing with out-of-date training info, prompting tips. How do we write good prompts? How do we write good queries? That's a key part of this. You saw early on in the demo where I told it to write a Python function and main for a product, and it produced something that was actually what worked for what I needed there. The more precise that you get with it, with what you're asking for it, the better off Copilot can help with it. And we'll talk about some of the enterprise enhancements. We're going to be focused on what you can do at the basic level with Copilot, but I also will give you some information about what can be done at the enterprise level and so forth. We'll talk about command line and terminal integration, and we'll finish up by talking about the future. Where are they going with Copilot next? What are they working on? There's some things with extensions and workspaces and stuff that are going to be pretty cool. They're always iterating over it. This is really a big investment, a big focus area for GitHub. So they are working on it all the time. Hands-on labs, these are the hands-on labs that we'll do. You can see, I won't read them all to you here, but the kinds of things, generating code, testing, so on, working with SQL. We'll build in some things along the way here, like how to deal with out-of-date things and best practices and how to write good prompts. So we'll have those factored in here. But again, we want to give you that broad experience, that broad knowledge of Copilot. So when you're done with the class, you can feel like that you've gotten what you came for, gotten your money's worth out of it, and understand and are ready to run in and use it. Here's a few testimonials from previous Copilot workshop attendees, just to other workshops that I've done, other conferences and things I've done on Copilot there. This is not meant to say, wow, look at how good Brent is. It's just meant to hopefully give you some reassurance that, we've done this a little bit and the people generally find it useful there. That's really the goal here. It's about finding the training useful for that. And finally, just a couple of quick notes on some additional training that Lena has already, I think, got scheduled out for us here. September 10th, we've got a hands-on with local LLMs, tools and techniques. What this one is about, this is about getting you up and running in a half-day class with using large language models, things like that ChatGPT is based on, and we're going to be actually seeing how to run things locally. We'll be using tools like Language Model Studio. I'll have, again, just a one-click environment or two-click environment for you to get up and running on. And then we'll be looking at using some tools like Olama to run models locally. We'll see how to use them on our CodeSpace environment. You don't need special hardware, don't need GPUs. We'll look at how to work with the Hugging Face community site, which is like a sort of a GitHub for large language models, data sets, and so on. And we'll actually create a chat bot. We'll create a chat bot with a web interface using a tool called Streamlit in Python there. No prior knowledge of that, any of this is needed. This is just to allow you to quickly get up and running, understand some more things about it. September 13th, we've got hands-on Gen AI from neural nets to vector databases. This is a more in-depth one. This is a day-long course or 6 hours where we'll be talking about everything from simple neural networks to vector databases to large language models to retrieval. How do we augment the stuff? Retrieval augmented generation. How do we add search our own PDFs along with things in the large language model and large language model agents as well, kind of giving you the breadth of understanding about the different elements that make up this thing that we call generative AI. We're not going to get into all the math. We're going to keep it simple enough for folks to use. Again, hands-on labs as always, where you get to play with training a neural network, putting things in a vector database, tokenization, and all sorts of stuff using large language models and so on. So I think that one's going to be pretty cool. And then September 22nd, understanding using GitHub security. GitHub is big these days. Of course, we want to make sure that it's secure. We're going to talk about things like how do we secure our dependency with Dependabot, scanning our code for any kinds of problems with CodeQL, and looking for secret scanning. All the features that GitHub provides for you to use will give you an example of how to use those and how to work with them. And then finally, on October 4th, we've got a Codium, free Gen AI alternative to GitHub Copilot. Codium is another one of these software development assistants, the coding assistants. They have a free version of it, has some nice features with it. So we're going to give you a chance to play with that and see how that one works. It'll be similar to GitHub Copilot, but has some additional features to it and kind of reinforce some things if you're already familiar with GitHub Copilot as well. All right, I think we're just about at the end of our time. I hope this was useful to you. Thank you so much for taking 30 minutes out of your day to join us today. And I hope that we'll get to see you on August 23rd in our GitHub Copilot class. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Brent. That is a good session. So also we have an discount of 20% by using the code webinar. Okay, so we'll just wait for 1 minute, Brent, if any Q&A.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, happy to have you come off of mute and ask or put it in the chat.
Yeah, they can post the question in the chat or in Q&A session. I'll monitor. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Brent. Thank you for the session. I have no questions coming up. Okay, there's one question. Hold for a second. Can you go through or do you want me to read it out? How do we know
Yeah,
Copilot?
John. So John's asking, how do we know Copilot wrote vulnerable code? I think what you're asking, John, is how do we know if the code is good or not that coming from Copilot? I'll give you kind of a quick answer on that. A couple of things happen here. First off, is you cannot guarantee that Copilot won't write vulnerable code. Uh, a lot of times people ask me, is Copilot going to take my job, or is Copilot does it do as well as a pair programmer, which is what GitHub always promises about it? And my answer is always, no to both. When I think about Copilot, I think about it more as having someone who is new to a team, right? There's already an established product or project, and you have somebody who's new to the team who's a useful coder, very able coder, but doesn't know all the ins and outs of it. So in that sense, Copilot is really ultimately trying to predict the next set of tokens. That's what these large language models do. So it will produce code, and chances are that it will be something that will be usable and such. But my point here is that no matter what produces the code, whether it is Copilot, whether it is another programmer, whatever, it is key to still have the testing, the code review, the checks, all the balances in there as well to do that, all the scanning. You can also have the other thing I'll mention really quickly is that on the GitHub side, they do, before they send back the suggestion to your side, they do some very quick patterns matching. It's not really truly scanning, but it's more like pattern matching to try to identify vulnerability. So you've got that kind of check up front, but also you also still need the other parts on the end. Can we upload core dump analysis to Copilot? Does Copilot identify buggy code, provide suggestion to fix existing code? I don't think you can upload a core dump analysis to Copilot, but you can ask Copilot to explain code or review code, and it can sometimes find things that are problematic in it. I was hoping that for some reason wouldn't let me edit it in the editor, but if I change like one of the variable names to, from I to X didn't exist, and I tell Copilot, go fix it, and it could suggest a fix for that I could accept or reject. So Copilot can identify problematic code for you, and it can do fixes to it. It can give you, what it'll do is it'll suggest fixes as well. Copilot create unit test code based on application development code? Yeah, it can. One of the things that I do, there's another session I do, or another class I do called testing with Copilot, and we do test-driven development, and we do the whole 9 yards. Now this isn't exactly what you're asking, but basically we have it create a POM XML file with some dependencies, have it create the test classes, see the test fail, and then have it create the implementation class based off of the test classes. But you could do it the other way as well. So yes, Copilot can absolutely create unit test code based on the application development code. You'll get better results doing it through the chat interface, because the chat interface is set up to actually provide more feedback and to provide more extensive feedback as well. Has longer to do it than you would through that. Can we upload unit test code and tell Copilot what percentage of the application development code is covered? I don't think so. I don't think you can do the code coverage analysis with Copilot. I think you still have to use a traditional code coverage tool to do that. So it's not as friendly in that sense. Now, with that said, there could be some way to do it in there. I haven't actually tried it. We could try it probably in the chat interface. There's they call it participant, the at workspace. At workspace, we could try and see how much code is covered. But that's one of those things which really isn't in the domain of like the large language models, which is what Copilot is basing on. They're more about prediction of text. So we would probably need to tie in something else to do code coverage in that sense. And thank you for the questions, John. Hopefully I've given you some answers that are useful there. Any
So
other
there's
questions?
one, yeah, we have a last question. What are the new features we can expect from Copilot in next 12 months?
New features next 12 months. Great question. A couple of things that I know that they're working on, and they're always iterating. So there's a blog that GitHub puts out every month about that. A couple of things I've seen. There's this movement within the large language model generative AI folks, which is about using what's called agents. And agents imply using these large language models to split up work. For example, if you were going to say create a program to play, a game or whatever, to create a program, sorry, write a program that plays the game of Go. I think that's one, right? Or whatever. The idea would be that you could have an agent that goes off and works on the requirements, an agent that goes off and works on the code implementation, an agent that goes off and works on the test. So there's this idea in the generative AI community of large language models where you have different models, different interfaces going off and doing different parts of a larger project, much as you might have different developers doing parts of a project in there. And this is something that Copilot is working on as well. It's a thing called workspaces, not code spaces, which is a virtual development environment, but workspaces. And the idea would be that within, you could tell Copilot, go off and implement this project and give it very minimal specifications. And it could go off and split up the different uh, work items of it and do those pieces and bring it all together. That's still, I think, more aspirational. In other words, not quite all there yet, but there have been, some other things that have suggested do that. So that's one thing they're working on, having these multiple instances of Copilot act as individual participants in a larger project and do it all together. Another thing I know they're working on is I think it's called extensions, Copilot extensions. I may have that name wrong, but it's the idea where third parties, companies can take their tool stacks and they can actually uh, provide an extension to Copilot so that Copilot can directly access their tools. If you're working in your IDE and you wanted to use company X's, I don't know, code coverage tool, maybe that's an example for going back to your previous question. They have a way to connect that in there. So it's a way to tie in other tech stacks, other tools to Copilot um, and provide that thing. It's also a way, honestly, for companies to hop on the Copilot bandwagon, much like any technology, Jenkins or anything else. If you want to play in that space, you got to have something that integrates with the technology. So those are two things I know from there. Copilot uses OpenAI. Will Copilot code generation change if Microsoft starts using their own LLM instead of OpenAI? Possibly. I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think they're going to do that though. They are pretty much integrated with the OpenAI. They started back in 2020, kind of experimenting with this. They jumped on board with the OpenAI folks in there. So they are pretty much tied to the OpenAI stuff now. They're probably going to be adapting to their newer models and stuff, but it's certainly possible. And in the Codium case, for example, Codium is based off of their own repositories, their own ones. They have a more permissive model there too. Now the code generation, to be clear, is based off of what was in GitHub. OpenAI, their stuff, they trained it on what was in GitHub. So it's still all based off of what was in GitHub at the point it was trained. But certainly if they switched models, it might change it there some as well. but I don't see them doing that anytime soon. They'll probably just be migrating to the GPT-4o models from where they're at right now. Can Copilot convert COBOL code to Java or C++ or C code? I haven't ever tried converting COBOL. If there is COBOL represented in GitHub, it probably could, but I would be skeptical about it, honestly. I did COBOL programming many, many decades ago, but anyway, you certainly can do things like convert, Java to C++. One of the examples we do in the class is converting, I think, Java to Go, or maybe it's Python to Go. Here's the deal. Copilot, it was, it uses the models that were trained on what was in GitHub. So to the extent that a language or a framework is represented in GitHub, meaning repositories having that in there, the more representation it has, the more knowledge the model has, the more it can build on that and the more it can understand. So if there probably isn't much COBOL, I'm going to guess, in GitHub, so it may not have much knowledge of that. With that said, it could be possible to augment that, to add it into your workspace and perhaps teach it a little bit about that. But I'd be skeptical of COBOL, but it can certainly convert other languages.
Thank you, Brent, for all the answers.
Absolutely.
We'll end the session.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank you,
all.
everybody.
Bye.
Appreciate it. All right. Take care. Bye.